Great, Liza.
Good.
Yeah,
Yeah, pretty good, I think.
very good.
Yeah, we're very busy. So thanks to her. She's the first thank you of this year. Thank you very much to my wife for enabling me to come out and take on all the extra things, which are necessary to enable me to come out on a night. So thank you very much to her. Hello to South Africa and Scotland over on the Zoom, and hello everybody. So as we were just mentioning before. Apologies, we don't have source sheets today. I did send it to the WhatsApp group if anyone wants to look at them in some way, and certainly for sure I can send them to you after if you like. But that is the first apologies today. Hey. So basically today we actually are coming to the climax of a mini series. The mini series, not that many. It's probably been about like maybe six-ish shiurim or something like that, quite significant. And the topic we've been discussing is purpose. And what's our purpose here? And there have been a few different answers which have been going around in that time. We've been trying to understand those as best we can, and maybe we'll do a little bit of a recap at the end of what some of the different ones have been. But there is one which is which we have yet to address, and I wanted to just begin with an anecdote that when I was in my first yeshiva, so it's about like maybe 11-ish years ago. So I was in Baal Teshuva yeshiva and in Jerusalem. And there was a rabbi there who gave he kind of took requests for shiurim to give for a certain thing, and someone requested a shir on Tikkun Olam. Um, so what is that? What do those words mean to you? Just or let me even ask, like, what do you think about tshuva people are thinking when they say those words, especially? What does that mean? I don't know, I don't know, or at least what I think people usually use this term for.
It's a, I don't, not sure it's used in the Shia world or the Orthodox world, but in the conservative,
That is what I'm getting at. Yeah.
it's very popular. It's the idea that a Jew is responsible to be a light unto the nation, and by that it means to repair or admonish in by example, not by actually complaining and saying, "Oh, you're doing it wrong," but by example of what they're doing or in trying to be a light to the nations.
That's an interesting take. But yeah, that's similar to what I was thinking. Yeah, what were you?
I grew up in the reform world, so a lot of that type of rhetoric was typically like go and be a social activist and go into the world and advocate for certain changes amongst society, whether that's environmental changes, government changes, social changes, things like that. I'm also Balto Shuva, so I've come to understand the term differently, but that's what I was growing up thinking.
Yeah, and I think that's what he was requested to give the shiur on by the guys. This kind of social activism, doing good in the world, like kindness, chesed,
Justice, equality.
even things like that. And so anyway, so the Rav gave so he kind of came on the day of the shiur, and he basically brought I don't know if he brought a source sheet or not. And he said there's not really anything to say in about like Tikkun Olam. There's like one line in Aleinu which says like Tikkun Olam, and basically he's kind of like he kind of like what's the word I'm looking for?
Downplay.
Downplay or kind of disparaged a little this idea, and that was I don't know if it was I would say surprise. It was like it was a I had never negative feelings when hearing that. Because that was basically like my main thing in life until that point I was involved in like nonprofit development, specifically in South Africa in Durban, and I was basically literally like going and going into townships and doing all kinds of like very hands-on work with impoverished individuals, and that had been like my main thing until that, and I had at least one or two career changes since then, but that was like something which I didn't enjoy that approach so much. But maybe that was me coming from a different world and me being encountering something which is a more authentic version of Judaism. But I actually now totally disagree. I totally disagree, and I think obviously with certain nuances, I think that we have tons to say about the idea of doing good in the world, doing good for other people, and there could be something incredibly central about kindness over and above. Because what are people? Oh no, it's not really about that. It's about Torah and mitzvahs. It's about all kinds of things that people say, and of course, in reality, those things are not divorced from each other. But take a little look at this. Oh well, you can't take a look. I'm so sorry. Get in your mind's eye. Just we all learned all the Torah in the womb, right? So just go back to that moment and open up the introduction to the Nefesh Hachaim. So the Nefesh Hachaim was written in that book itself was written by Reb Chaim Volozhin, one of the main students of the Vilna Gaon. But in the introduction is written by his son. So it's kind of interesting. You find interesting things in there. And one of the things he writes is this kind of like remarkable line where he talks about what his father used to say to them. He said as follows, Vahaya, it's interesting, I don't know, it's in parentheses, I'm not sure exactly why that is. So the son of Reb Chaim Volozhin says as follows. If you go to the source sheet, it's up there. It says, Vahaya ragil ochiachoti. He's talking about his father, the Nefesh Hachaim, Reb Chaim Volozhin. He always used to admonish me, al shira'a she'eineni mishtatef b'tza'ara da'achrina. He always used to admonish me if he felt I was not joining in with the tsa'ar, with the pain and the struggles of other people. If I was kind of separating myself from them and not feeling that had something to do with me, that's something he would say, no, that's not okay. Elai Tamid, and this is what he always used to tell me, Shezeh kol ha'adam. This is kol ha'adam. This is the whole human being is lo la'atzmo nivra. It was not made for himself. Rak loho'il la'achrini kachol asher yimsa b'kochol lasot. This is kol ha'adam is to help to help others as much as one possibly can, as much as was within one's abilities to do. So that's a bit of a game-changing line. The idea that this is what is funny because it's not an explicit line. He didn't write it himself, Nefesh Hachaim, but this was what it meant to educate his children to say that what is the thing that you need to be thinking about in life is helping other people, is thinking about other people, is connecting, feeling the connection to other people. So I'm not downplaying that. Of course, there are still going to be nuances between, let's say the Nefesh Chaim's outlook on life and some of the other outlooks on life that we were mentioning before. But the fact that, to say something like we don't really have much to say about the idea of doing good for others being like a central purpose in life, I think is totally wrong. However, saying that, so that can be a step one, but step two is, okay, so why indeed is that something which is so important? Again, for me, I find I like it, so far so good. I'm on board with it. But to say that it's a good thing, so that's fine. That's easy, I think. Meaning I don't find that so hard to say. But the question is, why is that kol ha'adam? This is your purpose in life. Is to try and do good for others in as much as you possibly can. So why is it the whole purpose? Why is it or at least, and absolutely, of course, there are different people who say there are different things which are the whole purpose, of course, but at least how could we understand this view on life, that this is the central point of life, is to join together with others is to join together with others and make that connection and do good for others as much as you can. So just in time. We were just asking the question, why is the Nefesh Hachaim apparently used to tell his family that the idea of kind of chesed, of helping other people, is like the central purpose in life? So the question is, I understand it's a good thing, but why is it so central? What do you think?
Well, I guess I think about like why did God create the world? For the whole purpose of him creating the world, he didn't have to. He was already king of the world before the world was even created. He was fine, everything perfect in his own regards, but he wanted to create the world because he was alone or wanted to connect with people. And so in some ways, like when I think about us as roles, as B'Tselem Elohim, like we are supposed to replicate God. And so if God's purpose of creating the world is to connect with us and to build a relationship with us, then that's really also our purpose as well. So that's
Amazing.
how I would, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. We're going to come back to that a little bit as well,
Mhm.
meaning a lot. So yeah, very, very well said. Any other points that people are thinking about in terms of what could be the centrality of such a thing?
Are we talking about tikkun olam for the non-Jewish world, or are we talking about even within the Jewish community in impoverished?
So it's a good question. It's a good question because for sure on a halacha level, there's for sure a difference. There's certainly hierarchies of responsibilities that you have, or kind of like priorities of responsibilities. You know, your responsibilities first come to those closest to you, and there's certainly a different level of both obligation and significance in, let's say, helping other Jews than helping other non-Jews. It's true that there's certainly a difference on a halakha level, but I've been thinking about this today. In terms of this idea of being the purpose of man to do good for others. I don't know. He doesn't say. So it could be indeed there is certainly a difference. I think the minimum thing we can say is still certainly a positive thing. But the question is it of the same level vis-a-vis this purpose? Are there differences? So the summary of that is I don't really know. I was thinking about this today. I was seeing because he doesn't say to help other Jews. Maybe that's what he had in mind. I don't know. He just says to help the achrini. He says to help others, to give good to others, to benefit others. So I don't know. What do you think? What do you think, Brian?
Before the holidays, weren't we talking about how in the times of the temple, like the primary point of it was to be like a light up unto the nations, kind of like show the world. So now we don't have that. So we when there's natural disasters, Israel's one of the first countries that has people in that country helping out, earthquake or something. So
Yeah.
I guess that's an example. But on the flip side of the coin, I always want to just make sure that it's a good balance, that we help others outside of our community, but make sure that the people here in Israel that are struggling, Holocaust survivors,
Yeah.
impoverished, that at least we take care of them.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. Meaning that it's kind of back to the idea of there's a word, I think it's called concentric circles of responsibility or something like that. There's a word for it in philosophy. The Rambam I think writes the same thing, but he didn't write in English, obviously. But in like non-Jewish philosophers, they have basically a similar idea that there's you have the closest to you is the first priority, and then out and out and out. So it is probably a very fair thing to say that that would be our primary responsibility. And I used to think one thing is like, people have small problems. People I knew had small problems. People that I was working with in Durban and Umlazi and Kwamashu, South Africa, it was like a matter of life and death every day. So I thought I was thinking that kind of would override and stuff like that. But now I don't know, because the truth is there's life and death. There's life and death also closer to home. I just didn't really, I don't know. First I was in Scotland, but still there's life and death closer to home. So I think that's a very fair thing to say, that there should be a priority in practice. But yeah, in terms of how to weigh that up, does that fulfill this purpose? Anyone else have Jay, yours? Welcome to you. Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask about a halachic issue, is if I have 1 hour available, whatever available, and I have a choice to learn Gemara, a block of Gemara, or to do an active chesed in your studies, what have you concluded?
The way I understand it is that basically, that's it. The way I understand it is that it really involves like a whole other share of what does it mean to learn Torah, and like what is the significance of learning Torah. But let's say, for example, in the terms of the Nefesh Hachaim, learning Torah is also a massive chesed for the world. It's intangible in the sense that it's not even intangible, it's just imperceivable, because you can't see where your words are having their effect, but they're very much having an effect. Saying that, even just in terms of a halacha level, that's like the outlook level. Now, halacha level, so basically the protocol is that if you can learn, so I'll come to Zoom in just a second. If you can learn, and someone else will take care of that mitzvah, so then you're meant to keep learning. So it's quite interesting. So actually, the ideal is that we should be learning as much as we can. But obviously, if you go to work, no one else is gonna. I mean, unless someone's gonna go to work for you and give you the money, that's one thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can always pray for that. But even other mitzvahs. So like, let's say, some of the guys are learning here in the base midrash, and they ask, can you come and help with a certain thing? It could be a mitzvah of chesed to do that thing, but if there's someone else who can take care of it, then you should continue learning around that. So it's a case by case basis, depends on. But if there's no one else to take care of that chesed thing, then the protocol is to do the chesed. So it's case by case. Perhaps, yeah. What were you thinking?
I was gonna say, we learn out from Abraham, the concept of being prayed for someone else, his prayer got answered first. Maybe that extends to giving. Somehow, like something, and certain energies, that if you give something to someone else, somehow you get that back, maybe more tenfold or further or something.
Nice. So you're thinking also about kind of back to the idea of the purpose, and the purpose of life in some ways being to give to others. And the question is, why is that so central? It could be it's not entirely divorced from yourself either. So that's a very interesting point as well. I think we had a question or a point from the Zoom.
Yes, I was just going to say that often, because you're helping somebody and they might not be Jewish, it doesn't take away from helping somebody who is Jewish. You're not usually choosing between one thing and another. You're taking whatever opportunity, depending on your circumstances and where you are, of trying to make a positive intervention in someone's life.
Yeah, it's a great point. Meaning we're asking questions which are a little theoretical, which is still worth asking, but a lot of the time you're not necessarily faced with that particular choice of like you got two old ladies who are crossing the road, and one is called Goldie and the other one is called Christina, or something like that, and like which one do you help? Like that doesn't
At the same time.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So in practice, it doesn't necessarily come up always in that way. It probably comes up for us in Israel in a certain sense because of the like foreign aid thing. It's quite interesting because not that I'm making the decisions which are of that kind of level, but there is like quite a lot of poverty here, and like what do you do when in terms of foreign aids and so it does come up here and there, but in fairness, yeah, not necessarily in your day-to-day life are you faced with this particular choice. So that's a great point as well. So actually I want to come back. I'm so sorry, I forgot your name already.
Oh, Ben.
Ben, okay,
Yeah.
fine. So actually, this next source very much comes back to what Ben was saying. So we're in the Das Tavunis now, which is a book of the Ramchal. And early on in this book, he's so it's an amazing sefer if people haven't come across it. Basically, the form of it is a dialogue between the soul and the intellect, and the soul is asking questions about life and about faith, and the intellect is giving the answers. Unbelievable. Well, no one translates the title literally into English. Literally, it would be something like Da'at, knowledge of understandings. So no one does that. They used to translate it as the knowing heart. And then they've now started to translate it as knowing God's plan or something like that. I don't know if they maybe even have it here. Have they got one here? Yeah, the one on the very top shelf with the green. So that's the more recent translation they called that. And I still wonder what I would translate it if I got the choice as to what it's translated. But I would probably call it all the important things that the Ramchal wants you to know about life and faith in the form of a dialogue between the soul and the intellect. That's probably what I would call it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. That's why they don't get me to name the books.
10% of our income charity, can that be given to, maybe you talk about that before, that could be given to Jews or Gentiles, or is it the 10?
That's a very fair point. The idea of Meiser, even though it's not necessarily a strict obligation, but it is a very strong minhag that we have, the idea of giving a tenth of your earnings, net earnings, whatever. So that's to Jews. That one's to Jews. So as we were talking before, there's certainly a hierarchy. The technical mitzvot of tzedakah is with Jews. There's other mitzvot which are involved. That's what we're talking on a halachic level. There's a clearer distinction between the two. The mitzvah of in terms of helping non-Jews is more categorized as darkei shalom, something called the ways of peace, which is not necessarily one of the 613, which tzedakah being one of them, and maaser is kind of like a subcategory of tzedakah. So in terms of that, no, certainly. I mean, I'll put it like this: I know a rabbi who gives some of his maaser to non-Jewish causes. I don't know whether he knows this halacha and disagrees, or or he doesn't know, or he is just giving extra. Maybe I didn't understand his financial arrangement. So I know of someone who does that. But from what I understand, as a general rule, that technical mitzvah applies to Jews. Not that there's not a mitzvah to give to non-Jews as well, but it's not necessarily part of Maaser, as far as I'm aware. So anyway, so with that, so basically we're asking a bit of a question about, we know that it's important to be doing good for others, and the question is in terms of why. So really, so I don't know if maybe Ben in a previous life was the Ramchal. I'm not sure, but let's have a look what he say. So Amar Seichel, the Seichel says as follows: Ma nuchal lahasig b'inyan zehu. So he's talking really about like the big questions of like what is the purpose of the world and what is the kind of process of creation. So he said what we can understand of this is ki akel yitbarach shemo hu tachlit hatov vadai, that God is the ultimate good. That's what we know for sure. V'omnam michokatov lehitiv. There you go. Michokatov lehitiv. The nature of good, or the definition of good, is to bestow that good, to give of itself. V'zehu ma shiratzahu yitbarach shemo. This is what God wanted in creation. Or why did God create? This is what He wanted in creation. Livro nivraim kadei sheyuchal lehitiv lahem. To create creations, things, in order that He would be able to bestow good upon them. Ki im ein mekabel hatov, if there's no one to receive the good, ein hatava, then there's no giving of goods, and then that would be a lack in God's definition of being tachlit hatov. So just in terms of this so far, what we're seeing is, I think, pretty much exactly what Ben said, that in terms of God's purpose in creating anything was for the purpose of giving. Lahitiv lazula. So He had to create. It's a whole question exactly how we understand the Tzimtzum, but in the simplest terms, God had to create something other than Himself. There wasn't anything other than Himself, and He had to create something other. Lahitiv lazulat, to create something other than Himself, because that will be the definition of hatava. We want this goodness to be flowing out of one entity into another, and so you have to create something other than God. God had to create something other than Himself, who would be able to do that. Who would be, in order that He would be able to do that. So that's and then that's where we come in. And by the way, I don't know if anyone's into, I know we've got Sumerian, but anyone into like Greek philosophy and like the Greek mythos of creation and stuff. But I understand maybe it's similar to in there, but like I think the idea of the gods creating was more a selfish purpose, right, than a selfless purpose. Is that the same?
And one of the Elishas said that they created the gods because there were upper gods and lower gods. The lower gods were working the earth to produce food for the upper gods, and they rebelled. And the upper gods were caught, short-handed on labor, so they created mankind to fill up that need. But man was not created for man's benefit. It was
Right.
created for the benefit of the upper gods.
Yeah, so it's amazing when you see like that's such a helpful contrast, because it's the exact opposite of our version of creation, where like God has absolutely no needs whatsoever, so that even the idea of creating could by definition only be for something else. And indeed that's what He wanted to do, and it's from His goodness, His quality of goodness, that that's not goodness if it's not giving, which is also just an interesting side point in terms of our own like character things. Like it's just not called goodness. There's no such thing as a good person, but they kind of keep themselves to themselves. Then it's a lack of a. It doesn't mean we're not holding everyone to perfect standards, but we just have to understand that that's a lack in goodness, which is interesting. I'll try and write it down, but I'll put it in my book about all the things that the Ramchal wants us to know about life and faith.
You can do the kitsur of all the things that the Ramchal wants you to.
Yeah, actually, that's a
Form of
there.
that.
Yeah, I actually want to do that. Actually, that's a different story. But so that's God's creation, and that's God's purpose, and that's how it looks, is to be giving to something outside himself. And so then with that, we could possibly see, so the purpose of creation at all was for the idea of hatava, bestowing of good. And so we could come back and say exactly as we're saying that when saying that in as much as we are in the image of God, and God wants us to be, I mean, there's partly that, and also there's the idea of alachta b'drachav, that we're meant to follow in the ways of God and to become godly. So that's how God does it. That's basically what he does, is looking outside himself. What can I do for something which is outside myself? And so we're really very much tapping into a very godly kind of purpose. There's one purpose which is also very important. We talked about last time of tikkun hamidot, of to improve oneself, which is also what the grass seems to say is the main purpose. And it's certainly very central for sure. But what that's doing is kind of like working within your own world. But we know that every person is a world, right? So in as much as you're going out and doing good for another, you're actually kind of giving to the world outside yourself. So it very much looks kind of like a lot what it's like a next level in a certain sense. One thing is to be metaking your own world, and then one thing is to even give good into the world of another. So that could that could be possibly why it's such a central idea, not just a good thing, but really central. Yeah.
I have two connections to that, like the three associations that pop up for me with like the purpose of why should
Yeah.
we be giving, and one of them is marriage and one of them is Mitzrayim, and the marriage part is
Not related.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, let's find out. Yeah.
No, it is.
Yeah. No.
In
It's easy.
marriage, as someone told me once, what you want in your relationship, you have to give.
Mhm.
You have to put in what you want,
Mhm.
what you want out of it.
Mhm.
And so how can I expect to, get help and love and assistance and whatever it is from anyone else if I don't put that out into the world?
Mhm.
And then that ties into
Mhm.
זכור כי גר היית בארץ לא לך.
Mhm. And just finish, just
Yeah.
kind of elaborate on that latter point, so I see I understand it.
As in, it ties into for me, reminding ourselves that we were once exposed and slaves in this, in this foreign country with foreign gods, in this completely, helpless situation. And now we're not,
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
and that also that we have to help other people who are in similar situations. Whether
Nice.
I'm not talking about specifically about immigration necessarily.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. The Torah says, Mara elaborates, but the Torah says basically what you say, at least in terms of the Mitzrayim points of the idea that it's kind of like since we were in that position, so that's one of the things which make us obligated to take care of the ger, the orphan, what's a ger, yatom, almana. Levi is also a kind of person who's like
It's a thing of as a people we know like the lowest form of it, or the most difficult form of being exposed and helpless.
Mhm.
So we have to have extreme compassion for people who are in that.
Yeah, it's like no excuse.
Right.
It's like this is the Jewish way which we're privy to because of our kind of collective experience. That's a great point. And there's great point. That's a great point.
Ironic that the whole world is accusing Israel of being.
I was about to say something about it, but I didn't. But yeah. So.
Bad at it.
Okay. So I don't need to say it. So this is a great point. So we're talking about that two points about marriage and Mitzrayim, and the idea of like if you want a good life, you want a good relationship, you can't just expect that to come to you. You have to invest, and also in terms of Mitzrayim, the idea of going out and giving to others being based on our own history of knowing like what it is like to be in a difficult position. And I think that's certainly true, by the way, I just will say, certainly true for individuals as well. Meaning one of the things which is there's times in life which are hard, and we all go through different kinds of experiences which can be moving from painful to brutal. And one of the things which it's important to bear in mind at that time, you might not be able to bear it in mind in that time, but just to know is it's gonna help you help others in the future. That's for sure. That's for sure. Because I know a certain person, for example, who like had a lot of money struggles growing up, meaning their family was like basically poor in a context where that was very uncommon. And it was really, it's caused them many challenges, both obviously at the time and even in their life since. They're kind of a little scarred from the experience. But they are able, but basically they're kind of like a confidant. They end up being kind of like a confidant, not formally, but just happens a confidant for like people who have similar experiences, people who have difficult family experiences, people who have either for money or for other reasons. And basically, like she gets it, like she understands it, and people naturally gravitate towards her as a confidant for that. So you know, it's a silver lining to something which is very challenging. Yeah,
I was gonna say like what's coming up for me is more like the Hasidic approach that like, you know, like like might like the collective soul of the Jewish people.
Yeah.
That's to a point when like the other in a way falls away.
Yeah.
And we're just one. And
Yeah.
so it's not even about giving to another. It's
Yeah.
just like we're just one.
Yeah.
One entity.
Yeah, that's another view. Maybe I'll bring that up because I didn't have a specific source for it as such. So I didn't quote it, but I asked my Rabbi Rubenstone a question about something like this once, and he I basically asked him this question. I said, like the whole of life seems to be a process about growing up and starting to think about other, like not just thinking about yourself. So like starting to look outside yourself and like think about others. And then like the whole idea of Olam Haba is all about receiving again. So like you kind of like try and grow up and become a giver. And then what's Olam Haba? Receiving all the good stuff. So it's just like I don't like surely by the time you've got there, then you like won't want that anymore. Like just an interesting idea. Like aren't we? Wasn't that what we were meant to grow out of this whole time? And he said to me basically something similar to you, is that it's not so much about looking outside yourself in as much as it's about realizing that you are not separate, that you encompass more, and you don't just stop with this. You actually are kind of one with something which is bigger than that. That's the kind of the growth process. And so in that sense, you never really give up on the idea of of receiving as such, but you grow as a person into someone who's bigger and realizes that you have these deeper connections and a certain oneness with others. So it kind of like related to that point. So you could probably that could be an alternative. So maybe I'll get him to write it in a book and then I'll quote it as a source of like why the idea of like the giving is so central. So I wanted to dwell for a few minutes on. So we've discussed a little bit about the why. Like why is it? So we've discussed the what as such, that this idea of like giving, caring for others, helping others, feeling the oneness with others, is in the words of the Nefesh Hachaim to his family, Zeh kol ha'adam. This is like why we're living in many ways. So according to that approach, and we discussed a bit about the why that might be. Why is it so central? And a few different interesting approaches going on. I wanted to discuss a little bit. We don't necessarily usually get this practical, but because it's such a practical issue, I want to discuss a little bit about how. Like, what is good chesed and what is bad chesed? And we don't have to bash the bad chesed, but like we want to also know what to avoid. How do we do this? How do we actually practically do this in the best way? And I'll just say, maybe it's obvious to some, but there is such a thing as a chesed which isn't done in the best way. That may be obvious to you or may not. But you might just think, okay, it's all about good for others and just kind of like go with no further calculations. But the truth is, it's not really enough. I'm not saying there's like no merit to that whatsoever. There's certainly merit to such a thing. But you can make someone feel not so good by trying to do something good for them. So what do you think? What are some things that we want to bear in mind when doing chesed to make sure that we're doing it in the right way? Not just that we're having a vague achievement of this purpose, but to actually achieve the purpose in the right way. So what do people think? What's big important good things to bear in mind? What's big red flags that we should avoid?
The hell is paid with good intentions as well.
Yeah, I don't.
That's what you're working on.
Yeah, my one is less extreme than that because again, my slogans are usually longer than the other ones. But I'm not. It may not be the path to hell as such because we're not saying there's not a merit in the thing. There's still a merit in the thing, but it's not the best way it could be done.
You can make someone feel small by
go on.
in the way that you give money to someone, and I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the way that you give someone money and the way that you relate to them and so on. You make someone feel small as opposed to.
Did you think of how someone does that as opposed to doing the opposite? Okay, so they're giving money in general. Let's say for some tzedakah context, let's say.
Yeah.
How could someone make how should we avoid making someone feel small versus the opposite?
Take an extreme example. If I were to go up to you and I see you in the street and I'm like, hey, I see you're having a hard time here. Why don't you take some?
Yes. Yeah. Pat them on the head.
Like there are milder versions of that still do the same job.
Like a condescending kind of thing.
Or even like sometimes you come off condescending when you're not.
Well, not mean, but yeah.
If someone's someone's sensitive on that issue or something.
That's also another great point. Yeah, it may not be the same thing for everyone.
You need to have sensitivity, I think, towards the situation and trying to take a deep breath before you do things as well, to think it through a bit.
Yeah, in terms
there's an aspect of zizut as well that you have to alacrity in doing things in chesed, but always to try to have a little bit of a watching eye as well to see.
Yeah, great point, side of like just calculating a bit before just going gung-ho, going ahead.
I always think of like helping like elders, and like sometimes they don't want to be helped, but you want to help them, like maybe they're carrying a lot of groceries and you want to help them grab a bag for them, but they really don't want you to help. So it's kind of like
that's a tricky one.
It's like a tricky one, but it's like, I guess if the intention's good and you're doing it out of like kindness, is it the right kind of kindness, or is it the right kind of chesed, or like should you first read the situation a little bit first? Yeah, I don't know.
It's a question. Has anyone ever been helped with something that they didn't want to be helped
Giving
with?
your seat to someone.
Right.
Yeah. That doesn't want it.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. You think about that. Brian, you had a thought?
I think it can depend on a ton of variables in each particular relationship somebody has with another person, a friend or whatever. Somebody can say something to me, advice or different things that or say to somebody else that they find offensive, but it could be said by a rabbi, for instance, and it can come off completely differently. I think it's important to keep things private. Private is important, not to take anything. Stay away from announcing things in some kind of an event with other people around, or on social media or whatever. That can make a big difference.
Yeah, definitely.
Seeing the consequences, I mean, just to follow the lines of what you do, it may not be positive because of how you're going about it.
Right. Yeah. So just to consider in terms of being public, and there's different kinds of ways to be public versus private, and that being a part of the sensitivities. We had from the Zoom as well, I think.
Yes, I mean, I think it happens a lot to people who are sight impaired and who have sticks, and people are always going to help them. So now I always say, would you like any help? And a lot of the time they say thank you, but no.
Yeah, that's great. Also, just like a way to, because you don't know, because it depends, but certainly, sight impaired people, physically impaired people, like wheelchair, for example. What's the other one I was just thinking of? There's another one, but also a stutter, someone with a stutter as well. To finish people's sentences. That's usually not very nice for a person with a stutter. It's like just give them the time and space and just care, like just treat them like a person, I guess. But yeah, but it's hard because the first thing, it's kind of like coming from a good place usually in some ways. It's like, I want to help. I want to help. So, but the idea that you were kind of saying of like, but to take a minute and think, well, what is the kind of thing which is gonna be beneficial, in both obviously on a practical, physical level and also on an emotional level and things like that. I'll just give maybe should I read the source? Yeah, let me just paraphrase a little bit outside. There's another part from the Das Tavunos, which is basically just the next lines. He said that Hashem, okay, wanted to do good for something other than himself. That's why he created the world, eventually us. But so that the best way to do that would be to enable us to earn it ourselves, because basically to receive a handout is he said, is embarrassing. It's embarrassing. It's not something which makes you feel good necessarily to receive a handout. And so we have inbuilt into the creation, into that exact thing, Hashem is thinking about how the recipient's going to take it. It's not just saying, okay, just good, just have it. No, like, it depends. And actually, interesting enough, in terms of some of the examples which were given, life is harder for us. It would have been easier if he'd have just given. But he saw that wouldn't make us feel nice. Wouldn't make us feel good about ourselves. So even though it gives us a harder life, it's like us choosing. It's like like us being, with our kind of like in spirit. What was that?
That was before the Chet.
Even before.
Even before, so how would it have played out?
So there was a very subtle kind of, now the world is like very, it's got a lot more negativity and darkness and stuff in it, but there was a certain element of negativity and darkness in the world before, much more subtle and much more confined. But nevertheless, he created even the first human being. Correct. So imperfect, but in a slightly imperfect world. If he stood the test, so
that would be mission accomplished.
Correct. But so what we do is just a bigger version of the same, of a more expansive version of the same thing. What would have taken him? Yeah, go on.
No, I said Tikkun Olam.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's the other version of Tikkun Olam is the more spiritual kind. But basically, what we're seeing is that even then, he chose to make it harder for Adam than Adam Rishon than he needed to give him the opportunity to earn it himself, and there was a chance to fail, and that indeed is exactly what happens. But that was something which enabled when one is able to make the right decision, then they are empowered to do so, and not otherwise. And so that's just basically like the way that I think about it is basically when you are doing chesed, okay, number one, to think, but number two is to think about them. Who is it for? It's for them. It's not for me. It's not for me. It's for them. And if that's the approach, then usually you'll probably start these. But I think many people are not necessarily. If you've been, as I've certainly been, a recipient of a chesed, which made me feel not good. And I think that again, not thinking at all. / they were kind of thinking about themselves. I want to be a big chesed person. I want to be a chesed person. I want to be a person who's always giving. So I was like an object. Sort of to them. I was like a way to achieve their goals of being a giver. So that wasn't so nice. In contrast, to treat someone like a human being. Oh, you're an actual human being. And I'm thinking about you. So I think that's probably the formula for success. So basically with this, just to end on a sort of final word. So we discussed in the mini-series a few different reasons, 4 main reasons which are brought up in different sources for being the purpose of creation or the purpose of life and why we're here. One of them was the spiritual version of Tikkun HaOlamot, where we are with all of our thoughts and speech and actions making a positive spiritual difference in the world and driving the world forward to being a better place in all kinds of ways. We also discussed the idea of devekut and connection to God and actually building that relationship with God as being a purpose. As we alluded to before, we also discussed the idea of tikkun midot, which is what the Gra kind of focuses on as the main purpose of being alive is to improve ourselves. And in terms of today, the Nefesh Hachaim's like line that I used to say to his family about, what's your main purpose? To do good for others and benefit others and think about others and join in with them even in their tsar. And with that, basically, I just wanted to end on a line of the Nefesh Hachaim from a different parts of the book. And he says basically as follows: Al Yamar b'libo chas v'shalom. כי מה אני ומה כוחי לפעול במעשיי השפלים שום עניין בעולם. That no one should ever say in their hearts, who am I and what's my ability to achieve, to do anything, to achieve anything with my lowly actions in this world. אומנם יבין וידע ויקבע במחשבות ליבו, we should understand and internalize שכל פרטי מעשיו ודיבוריו ומחשבותיו, every single action and speech and thought that we have, כל עת ורגע, every single moment, לא יתאבדו חס ושלום. Nothing is ever lost. And I think this is like a big message of hope and of encouragement, because this is a thing for people think depression is about being sad. It's not really about being sad, it's about being hopeless. And everyone can speak for themselves, but just in my like experience and speaking to different people, usually say, oh, they think because I laugh, like I'm not depressed. It's not like that. It's because I have no purpose in life. And that's one of the reasons it's hard to get out of bed. And there's many, obviously everyone's got different things. But it's something I found a lot in terms of kind of like a more central point in depression is the kind of hopelessness and purposelessness. Like what's it all for? What's it all about? And just one of the messages of hope, which for me comes from this, is that whether it's about using our actions to change the world in a spiritual way, or to do through the actions of the Torah Mitzvot to build a relationship with Hashem, or to change ourselves, or to give good to others, all of these things are super accessible. All these things which are considered the purpose of creation or the meaning of life and the way that we achieve what we're meant to achieve in life, they're super accessible. They don't require wealth. They don't require status. They don't require even necessarily reputation as such. A person can, in their own little way, be doing things which seem very small, but are actually basically the purpose of everything. So it gives a message of hope, is that kind of what the Nefesh Hachaim is saying, is that we never need to think that what we do is lost, and nothing that we ever do is ever lost, and everything is infused with meaning. Yeah.
Helping others is gives oneself
Yeah.
just the fact that we like we